Hello everybody and welcome back to Sprocket. This is going to be the first video I put out on this game on this channel. If you want to check out the full review that I did on this over on my main channel, I'll put a link to that in the description so you can go ahead and check that out before you watch this video if you want to see what my opinion on the game is. But today we're going to be looking at one of my builds. Now I'm not sure exactly how I want to do these in the future because I plan to look at my builds and eventually potentially your guys' builds in the future once the ability to share those is added into the game. There is a way to do it right now, but it's kind of a little wonky, and I'd rather do my own builds at this point and then introduce your guys' builds once it's added in as support. I think that's planned relatively soon, but I don't know, I digress. Let's get into the build. We're gonna hop into the regular sandbox. As you saw from the thumbnail, we are going to be looking at my build of the Tonk. Now before you comment, yes, it has to have 2 tracks. Unfortunately, there is just literally no way that you can build this with 1 track. It's not supported in the game currently, but this, I believe, is the smallest that I can possibly make it without using the cheat that you can use to nullify the space constraints. I might do a video on the cheat in the future. I haven't actually tried it out myself, but supposedly it's there. Now, I'm not sure why my internal space is screwed up right now. It might just be because of this ammo that I loaded into the tank. It's weird. Maybe I made a change that I didn't save to the design. Come on, 6 shells. Oh, I guess it can only hold 5. Well, anyways. What did I do to build this thing? I figure the way that we can do this is we'll take a look at the design and then I'll show you how it functions. On other designs I'll probably go over like what the armor and everything is on this, but with this tank there is no armor. I have no armor. I have absolutely no weight. I've shrunk this thing down and somehow there's 3 people in this tank. I don't know how they fit in there. The driver has got to be sitting on top of the engine. The gunner and commander, I don't even want to think about what they're doing because there's no way that they're both inside of that. I mean, unless they're both standing there, but then where would the engine go? So anyways, what I did to build this is I essentially shrunk the hull down as small as I could possibly shrink it. And then I even added an external fuel tank on the back because internal fuel takes up space. So get rid of that, have an external fuel tank. That's all that's powering the tiny little 2-cylinder engine that's powering this thing. Although I was able to squeeze a whopping 51 horsepower out of this. Technically, I could get this a little bit smaller. If I pulled it down a bit, I could get the internal space down, but honestly, there's really no reason to do it because you're not gaining enough to make it matter. That's kind of my thought of it. So I don't copy this tuning by any means for your engines. This is just kind of what I have set for this thing. So I've got it set at 2000 RPM because, oh, actually I had tuned it up to 4000 RPM. So it does get up to 102 horsepower. I was able to get it to hit, I think 22 kilometers an hour was my top, 22 miles per hour was my top speed with this thing, which is pretty impressive. For the transmission, it is currently a 2-gear, 1 gear forward, 1 gear reverse, and as you saw from the engine, it's operating at 4200 RPM with that little 2-cylinder. So this thing's essentially a lawnmower, and it moves along pretty good, other than the fact that the suspension barely works. Now, the suspension is probably the thing that took me the longest. Well, no, it is the thing that took me the longest. I spent, I think, 3 hours probably in total just on the suspension of this thing, trying to get it perfected. I had to start by trying to eliminate as many of the road wheels as possible because the Tonk technically has 2, but you have to have the Sprocket, and removing the road wheel in the middle basically just makes it drop down. Right now, the way that the suspension works is you have to have a road wheel, otherwise it won't register properly. At least that's what happened when I tested it without one. So what happens here, you can see a slight angle. What I had to do is I have the middle wheel set at a slightly lower height than the idler wheel. The sprocket is set as close to the height of the road wheel as possible, so it'll drive on these 2. and then the idler wheel is set slightly higher, and the only reason I did that is because when you take this thing and you drive it off the ramp, before I was having an issue where it was basically hitting the ground and it was bottoming itself out. It wasn't actually bottoming itself out on anything, but because of the way that the traction works, I think the traction is determined by like the road wheel for some reason. I wasn't actually able to grip with the track to pull myself off, so it would just go and then stop, and I couldn't move it anymore. So I had to move the spacing and everything. I basically have this as fine-tuned as possible with the idler as low as I could possibly get it without it just bottoming itself out. Alright, moving on to the firepower. What did I equip this thing with? As you saw before, it can only hold a whopping 5 rounds of ammunition. But I was actually quite surprised with what I was able to get out of this little cannon. I have it equipped with a 50mm, which I think looks fairly accurate. I could probably beef it up just a little bit, but I'd run out of turret space for that. But it can get a 58mm of penetration just about, which honestly, I would say that's pretty impressive for a small tank like this. You might actually be able to complete some of the missions with this if you don't get stuck before you actually get into the fights. At first, I thought when I was testing this out, I was shooting at other of myself in the other test range with it, and I wasn't able to knock them out, so I thought maybe I glitched the game, but no, I tested it in one of the missions, and that is not the case. It does die. And I mean, it doesn't really take much. You can basically kill this thing by driving into walls. Next, onto the crew. Like I said, there's somehow 3 people in here, and I was actually able to allocate full space to both the loader gunner and the commander in the turret. So somehow they both have plenty of space up there. I really don't know how. I guess they must be laying down. Maybe the commander's kind of like sitting and can look with his head out, and then the gunner is kind of like maybe prone. I really don't know, but yeah. That's just, he's doing it somehow. Oh, one other point that I forgot to mention when it comes to the tracks. You may have noticed these are very thick. I changed the thickness of the tracks, which actually help it get off of the spawn area, because the extra height gives it just a little bit more clearance on the ground. Alright, well that's very much enough talking about this design. Let's take it out for a little spin and you guys can see what she's capable of. I hope that I saved all of the engine tuning that I did yesterday, because it was having issues where it was maxing out before with the transmission stuff that was happening. So as you can see, acceleration, not the greatest. I'm not even going to try going over those because it just will not. So it can actually cross these fairly well, in fact. And if we get her moving pretty good, it can actually, it might not do it. It probably won't now that I say it. Yeah, it can. It can clear a trench, so it is officially a tank. So let's take it over onto the straightaway and we will see how fast we can get her going. Alright, and here we are on the test strip. Now we're gonna put the pedal to the metal and see how fast she goes. Keep in mind, I'm pretty sure if I geared this thing a little bit better with some more tweaking, I can get its acceleration to increase, but this thing is pushing all she's got. 2-cylinder engine. Alright. We are climbing in the revs. Remember that if we hit 4,200, that is the maximum this engine will do, and if we sustain over that for too long, we will blow the engine. So I basically have this thing right at the very max, and it will start to damage the engine if you run her straight out for too long. But I mean, that's kind of to be expected with most engines, so it looks like we're getting just about, come on, can we hit 22? Doesn't look like we're going to hit it. I was able to get it to about 22 yesterday, so clearly there's a couple issues with my tuning for the engine. I might have had the gearing adjusted slightly. But regardless, I think that that's pretty good for a little tank like this. Well, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I think that's really all that I can do with it. If you guys want to see this in a mission, let me know. But I really just wanted to do an overview of the build. If you guys have any ideas for doing these in the future, do let me know, because I want to make a lot more videos like this in the future. It seems like something that would be really fun and enjoyable for you guys to watch and for me to make. So if you have ideas of ways that I can show off the vehicles better, do let me know, and I'll see you in the next video, I guess.